Hello everyone, welcome to week 3 of the programming logic class. In front of you here on the whiteboard I have a simple problem. I want to find the average test score for a class of 8 kids. The reason why I have this problem up there is to demonstrate to you in which situation we may not have enough in our toolbox with just our if conditions and our variables and operators. We may have to go a little bit deeper and look for something called as loops. This is a classic example of where we might have use for loops. Anytime you find yourself repeating yourself in your code, there is like repeating logic that happens. There is a problem with readability because you are writing the same chunk of code multiple times, which is going to confuse the reader of the code, whoever comes in to maintain that software. It's going to be hard for them to follow along what's going on. The second thing is that when you repeat yourself and you rewrite code, the same code again and again multiple times, there is a very good possibility that you might be introducing some bugs. So the number of lines of code versus the number of bugs have like a direct correlation to them. So you want to always reduce redundancy and increase reusability and readability of your code. And loops really help us to achieve some of that efficiency in our code. So here's a very simple example that you can do without loops. And here's what I have shown you. So I have 8 kids here, and then their test scores are here. So these are the kids, their names, and then the test scores. Okay. So how I would write this logic normally is I would say input test score 1 for kid 1, test scores 2 for kid 2, so on and so forth, right? 8 times. So I would have this input statement 8 times. And I will store it in 8 different variables. Okay. So the variables will all be called, for kid 1, it will be K1, for kid 2, it will be K2 or T1, T2, whatever it is the test score is, it is going to have 8 separate variables. So if I were to write it here in my Repl, so I would say test score 1 test score 2. So I'm repeating myself. When you start repeating yourself, you know that probably there is a better way to write code. It is easy to cut and paste, I agree, but then you should start thinking there should be a red flag going up saying, why am I repeating myself? I shouldn't be repeating myself. I should be writing code that's very reusable. Now see, I've repeated myself 8 times. And I have 8 variables. Now, if I want to add all these variables, all these test scores, I would say int sum or total equal to T1 plus T2 plus T3 plus T4 plus T5 plus T6 plus T7 plus T8. Then I would say double average total divided by 8. Then I would say console dot write line Okay, so this is how I would be normally doing it. With the tools, the limited tools we have in our toolbox so far, as of week 3, this is something we have arithmetic operators. We know how to read and write. We know how to add the numbers. We know how to declare variables. So the most inefficient thing is we have used 8 different variables to store the same data type. The data type is just test score. We have used 8 different variables, number 1. And then we have also assumed that this program should only work for 8 different students. What if I have 80 students? I have to introduce already another 72 rows of console.readline. I have to introduce 72 new variables. I have to update line 17 to add all the another 72 variables. And then I have to change line 18 to change the total from 8 to 80, and then I'll get my average. And then after a month, we change it to 2400. How do we do it? Doesn't make any sense. Every time you declare a variable, you are using a small piece of the computer's memory. And then once all we are saving this up for is so we can get to this step total, and then we can add all of them. That is the reason why we are going. So now we are introducing a nightmare. It doesn't make any sense. So it is a very inefficient way of writing code. All we need the score for, we just need the score in our memory so we can add it to the total. That's all. That's all we need the score for. We don't need the score for any other purpose here. So what if there is a way for us to shrink all these statements and modify this statement? Because when you change this guy, the variables here, this definitely has to change too. So they have to go together. So what if we can use loops to replace this whole thing? So that is what we are looking at. Let's go back to our, here. So not only this guy gets affected, this guy also gets affected, right? So till then, we have to make sure that there is a better way of writing code. Okay, so how do I, if I'm going to use one variable to called test score, instead of like test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4, test 5, test 6, test 7, test 8 variables, if I'm going to use like one variable, then my question is, how do I ask for 8 variables? What are the tools available? So how we can do that is where the loop comes in. Instead of like these 8, let's delete all these. Call this as test score. The loop you have is called as a while loop. So let me write here the syntax of the while loop. While condition and then parenthesis. Let's bring up the W3 schools. So we know we need loop, we just have to decide which loop, right? So while condition, do something inside a code block. So as long as this condition is true, this will continue execution. So for example, you can see here, while this variable I is less than 5, it will write that number and then I gets increased here. Okay, this is called as a counter variable. It doesn't have to be I, it doesn't have to be called counter, it is just a counter variable. Let me show you what I mean. So we have to have some way of counting. So if I were to like clap in the class, if I asked a student to clap in the class and another student to keep counting the number of claps, every time somebody claps, you remember that they clapped once. So that is called as a counter variable. Counter initially, we have no inputs here, right? We have no input, so the counter is 0. Every time in the loop, I put in the loop and I get a test score, the counter should increase by 1. So 0 plus 1 is 1. Second time counter will become 1 plus 1 becomes 2. So what am I saying here when I keep saying whatever? So I'm taking the old value of counter 0 and adding 1 to it. So here the old value of counter is 1. I'm adding 1 to it. So all I'm saying is I'm just counting how many inputs are being received. As soon as I receive an input, I increase the counter. I get input, increase counter. So what should I do here? I get the input. Okay, I have to decide what the counter is. I'm going to call it as counter. So int counter equal to 0. That is initial, right? Here, see, right here, the first guy is called int counter is 0. This is outside the loop and this repeats. I define the variable. Now I'm going to say while counter less than or equal to less than 8, because we start at 0. While counter less than 8, what are we doing? We are getting the input. Okay, so this is just a condition. First time counter is 0. We are checking, is it less than 8? Yeah, 0 is less than 8. And then here I have to say counter plus plus. Counter plus plus. Plus plus is a unary operator. Counter plus plus is the same as saying counter equal to counter plus 1. This confuses a lot of people when I say this. What do you mean counter equal to counter plus 1? What does that even mean? It means peek into the value of the counter variable. Add 1 to it, save it back to counter. Those are the 3 steps. Peek into the value of counter. First time counter is 0. Add 1 to it. Counter, so 0 plus 1 is 1. Without assignment operator, variables won't change value. We don't want counter to have 0 anymore. We want it to have 1. So we are saying counter equal to counter plus 1. So whatever is the calculation here will go into this counter variable only if you do this assignment statement. So what happens? First time, so this iteration, this is exactly what happens. First counter is 0. You come in here, counter becomes 1. Counter becomes 2, 3. You keep on going, right? Let me just do all of them here. This is exactly what is happening there. So now counter not less than 8, so exit. Okay, this is what is happening every time. So first we get this input, then we increase the counter. Maybe this should go on this side. Okay. Yeah. So first we get this input, then we increase the counter, then we validate the counter. Every time you come in, then the loop repeats, you come here, and then the loop repeats, you come here. Right, these are the 2 steps you keep doing over and over and over. And then when you repeat the loop here, you exit the loop. So you are getting input, changing the value of counter, checking the value of counter. If it doesn't meet the exit criteria, you go into the loop again. So here is what we are doing. So we are saying while counter less than 8, we are getting the input and then adding to the counter. So if you were to check the value of the test score at the end, it got overwritten. Only the last value, what do we have, 67, will be the only value inside this test score. That wouldn't work very well for us if this total is waiting for these 8 variables. There are no more 8 variables. So this has to first of all move inside. All variable declarations, try and make it outside the loop if possible. So what we are doing here is, before we go to the counter, we say total equal to total plus test score. All we are, any time you access a variable on the right side of an equal to sign, you are just peeking for its value. You are not changing its value. You are looking inside the bucket total. What does it have initially? It has 0. Now you are adding 0 plus the first test score, which is 71. So you are getting the total, this addition expression gives you 0 plus 71. Yeah. So this is what's happening. So you are getting total equal to 0 plus 71, that is 71. Next time it will be total equal to 71 plus 89, that's 160. Next time you're getting total equal to 160 plus 90, 250, so on and so forth. Here you are just accessing the total value of total. So this is the equation, right? You're taking the value in total and the value in test score, adding it, and unless you put it back in total, the value of total will not change. So this part people get, they forget this part. So make sure you do both. Okay, now what happened? All those lines of code, this can work not just for 8, it can work for any number. Okay, so what is happening here? So we have total, nothing else changes here. So the 8 is the only thing we hard coded, even that can be changed. And I'll show you in the next example how we can do that. So this is going to be a program that can take 8 input. If at all you're going to change 8, what you can do is, you can ask people to give you the number of kids. So you can say console. You know what, actually for this example, I'm going to leave it like this, and then I'll build upon this for the next example. Okay, so this program will work for 8 kids, but their scores can be different. Let's test this program. It doesn't have to be the same 71, 80 for every time. Okay. Okay, so first score is 71, 89. I can put anything I want, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I got my average as 57. So let's make it more readable, right? Let's have a prompt here, console dot write line, enter score of kid, and then here we can say okay. See, now I can totally use like another totally different. See, this is all single digit. We divided by 8, same thing. We have an average now. Okay. So this is the basic counter controlled iteration. Iteration is where you're repeating the loop multiple times. So you're going step by step and repeating a set of steps. So very easily this program can be changed to do 18 children or 2,500 children. It doesn't matter because we are using only one variable for test score and we are immediately using the test score. So you may be having questions like, what if I want to like do something else with the test score? What will I do? We have other kinds of variables called arrays that come a little later. I think probably next week. So we can like go over that in that situation, how to use it. But for now, instead of declaring a zillion variables, just so we can add them all together, which is not very efficient use of time or code or efficiency or nothing like that. So we are just going with this particular approach where we are just using one variable to be a storage for the same type of data. So test score, for test score, we are having only one variable because we need 8 test scores using the same variable and then processing this information in a much more efficient process. Hope you find this helpful. Thanks.